first job is whip out the old pads, out with the rubber grommet, 5mm Allen key, out they come. They look pretty much the same as the 250, but I wouldn't like to bet on that. They tend to wear one-sided, the piston side. As you can see, they're pretty much knackered. They've only done 4,000 miles, but it's pretty much all off-road, and all the grit and shit going through there is not going to help. This little spring clip can be a bit of a pain. I tend to turn the caliper upside down, and there's a little ridge that just sort of fits in like so. In with the new pads. Don't put any copper grease on them, it'll just attract shit. But do put a bit of copper grease on the thread of the pin, because as the elements start to get in, it'll get progressively harder to get out each time. And don't over tighten it, you're just making it hard for yourself. Should be a tyre lever around here just to widen up these pads a little bit. You know that horrible feeling when you're trying to get the wheel back in and you ain't opened up the pads. Next job, off with the front sprocket. I'm going to put a new one on because it's starting to hook a little bit, so I can prolong the life of the chain and the rear sprocket just by replacing this. I usually use 2 sprockets to 1 rear. Can be a little bit fiddly getting that lemon shaped clip lined up in the right place. Putting these 2 sprockets together, you can see where it's starting to wear and starting to hook a little bit, and this is where the power is coming from. So putting a new one on, it's all going to mesh a bit better. A little bit of oil on there, here we go. This kind of lemon shaped clip can be a bit fiddly to get off, and to get it back on it should be quite straightforward because it's offset. It should only go one way, although if you tried really hard I'm sure you could muck it up. There we go, bolts back in. Remember, they're only 10mm, just nip them up, don't do them silly tight. They're only holding a little plate on. Give the spacers and the spindle a bit of a clean up. I usually put a bit of copper grease on the spindle and ordinary waterproof grease on the spacers. Try and keep that shit out. Getting the back wheel in these can be a bit of a pain. The spacers keep popping out and stuff. So what I do, I make up a dummy shaft. I've got a little bit of tape on one end just to keep it a reasonable fit, and I'll poke that in first like so, and it's just flush with the spacers either end. It's not sticking out at all. So I've got the wheel sitting on a bit of wood which I'll use as a lever to help line things up. Now in with the main shaft, and if you get that roughly lined up, tap it in and it should push the dummy shaft out the other side. Yeah, here we go. Need a specialist tool now. Where's my hammer? I've got quite a few specialist tools like that. So that's knocked the dummy shaft out and everything's come through. Back on with the spacers, the nut, and I shall do it up tight and then back it off a bit so I can adjust the chain. Now I'm now going to put a trials tire on the front. Another specialist tool here, you can see. So I could make a dummy shaft up for the front, but I don't think it'll go through the threads on the other side. But this is not so much of a faff, it's quite easy putting the front wheel in, providing it's off the ground. I won't show you how to change the tyre with the tubeless system because I showed you in the previous video. Yeah, just remember to whip the pads open a little bit so it all goes back together easy. So new tyre on. Shaft back in nicely, tighten it up reasonably tight, don't do it silly tight. Don't forget you've got to centralise that spindle on the forks. I tend to do it the old style way, where you just push down on the forks like so, so it centres itself, then do up the pinch bolts. Some people just spin it and then pull the brake on. Not too tight, they are pinch bolts. You're going to need a 10mm and a 12mm to adjust the tensioner up to adjust the chain. And the same the other side, make sure you get it nice and even. And I adjust my chain the old school way, put all my weight on it, keep pushing down, check for, make sure it's not too tight. Remember, it's better to be a little bit loose than a bit too tight, because it will just wear everything out. And then tighten up the rear spindle. Chain all lubed up, and then sprayed again with waterproof grease. And there are my specialist tools: 1/2-inch plastic water pipe, a homemade front spindle tool, and my favourite, the hammer.